Concerns grow further over a service vacuum at hospitals, as medical professors from the country's 5 major hospitals say they will take a day off once a week amid their prolonged conflict with the government. The first official meeting between President Yoon Suk-yeol and main opposition leader Lee Jae-myung, which was due to take place this week, will happen next Monday afternoon. They will talk over tea without a preset agenda, following a tussle over the agenda between the two sides this week. More signs indicate that Israel's ground offensive into Rafah in its fight against Hamas is imminent, as the Israeli army has deployed tanks along the border with the southern Gaza Strip and has intensified airstrikes. It's April 26, 2024. This is Newscenter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with growing patient concerns over a service vacuum at hospitals. Medical professors at the country's major hospitals have decided to take a day off once a week, except for certain cases, amid their prolonged conflict with the government. Our An Song-jin brings us up to speed.
With the government and medical community still divided over the medical school admission quota issue, the professors at all of South Korea's so-called Big Five hospitals have decided to halt most medical services for one day during the week. 4 out of 5 had already decided to do so, but on Friday, the Catholic University of Korea Seoul St. Mary's Hospital follows suit, although when that day will be hasn't been decided. Professors at Seoul National University Hospital and Severance Hospital will take April 30th off, while those at Asan Medical Center will take a break on May 3rd. Professors at Samsung Medical Center will take voluntary days off based on their working schedule. Whether this will become a regular thing during the week is to be discussed by each hospital. Surgeries and outpatient treatment will be paused for the day, but emergency and critical care, as well as treatment of people already in hospital, will continue. The medical community says this decision was due to prolonged working hours, exhaustion, and mental and physical stress. Even if the Korean Medical Association's emergency committee decides on a date for a weekly day off, it is the individual professor's choice on whether to take it or not. It has been about a month since doctors submitted their resignations, but no action has been taken. Medical professors such as those from Seoul National University Hospital are looking to resign as of May 1st and are considering absenteeism without notice if their resignation letters are not accepted. Meanwhile, the KMA has maintained its staunch position against the increase of the quota of medical school admissions. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol and main opposition party leader Lee Jae-myung will sit down on Monday to hold their first ever official meeting, as both emphasize the need to discuss pressing issues related to people's livelihoods. Yoon's senior secretary for political affairs, Hong Chul-ho, said Friday that the meeting will take place at the presidential office on Monday at 2 p.m. Hong said the two are expected to talk over tea for about an hour, although the meeting could stretch on. The president wishes to hear all that the opposition leader has to say as soon as possible without a preset list of topics. This follows days of contention between the two sides, as the presidential office said there should not be a preset list of topics, while the opposition party insisted that there should be, which should include a universal payout of 250,000 won. Both expressed hope that Monday's talks would serve as an opportunity to resolve urgent matters related to people's livelihoods and the economy. Korea's economic expansion of 1.3% on quarter during the first 3 months of this year has rendered uncertain the opposition party's call for a supplementary budget. Park Gon-ho explains.
South Korea's opposition Democratic Party's proposal for a supplementary budget of 13 trillion won, or around $9.4 billion to stabilize people's livelihoods, could lose ground as the economy has recently seen higher than expected growth. The Bank of Korea's data for the gross domestic product in the first quarter released on Thursday showed an on-quarter surprise rise of 1.3% due to a recovery in exports, construction investment, and private consumption. The growth figure was higher than the early expectations of 0.6 to 0.7% for economic growth in the first quarter. According to Article 89 of the National Finance Act, the government can only make extra budgets in exceptional cases, such as a war, major natural disasters, or an economic recession. But as the opposition party is asserting economic crisis as the reason for a supplementary budget, the strong economic data for Q1 could possibly put the brakes on their recent proposal, as it does not meet those legal requirements. Still, as those findings are shown to be partially due to the base effect, and as both the ruling People Power Party and opposition Democratic Party are concerned about the economic sentiment, it has been reported that the opposition party could still push for the extra budget. But other factors could prevent the proposal from moving forward. These include the impact of the record-high shortfall in tax revenue from last year and the backlash toward frequent supplementary budgets, especially as the government debt exceeded 50% of GDP last year. The government has made extra budgets 4 times in 2020 and 2 times each in 2021 and 2022 during the COVID-19 pandemic. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Contrary to market expectations, the U.S. economy noted a modest expansion of 1.6% on-year during the first quarter of this year, reigniting concerns about stagflation. Shin Se-byuk has this report.
The U.S. Department of Commerce released a report on Thursday that showed that the world's biggest economy grew at an annualized rate of 1.6% for the first quarter of this year. This marks the lowest rate since a contraction of 0.6% in quarter 2 of 2022. This figure is significantly lower than the previous quarter's growth of 3.4%. It also falls well below the 2.4% increase anticipated by market experts polled by the Wall Street Journal. The Commerce Department attributed the slowdown to reduced personal spending, fewer exports, and decreased government expenditure at both the local and federal levels. Personal consumption, the largest driver of the U.S. economy, increased by only 2.5% in the January to March period, down 3.3% on quarter. There was an uptick in spending on services such as healthcare, finance, and insurance, but there was a notable decline in the consumption of goods, including cars, gasoline, and other energy products. Challenges remain in the U.S. as inflation remains persistently high amid weakening economic growth. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, a key inflation variable for the Federal Reserve, rose at a 3.4% annualized pace for the quarter. It is the highest increase in the past year and a substantial jump from the 1.8% seen in the prior quarter. The core PCE prices, which exclude food and energy, jumped 3.7%. This figure, a key indicator for the U.S. Central Bank when setting interest rates, far exceeds the Fed's target of 2%, dampening hopes that the Federal Reserve would begin cutting interest rates in the near term. Amid fears of stagflation, a scenario of stagnant economic growth fared with high inflation, Wall Street stocks closed lower on Thursday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average slid by 0.98%. The S&P 500 lost 0.46%. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq Composite fell 0.64%. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign exchange transactions in the first quarter this year reached a record high, led by robust investment in the securities market. Data by the Bank of Korea on Friday show that the daily average came to $69.4 billion from January to March. That's a rise of almost 10% compared to the previous quarter and the highest on record. The bank says investments from home to overseas securities markets and foreign investment to the local security market both rose compared to the fourth quarter of last year. Israel's ground operation in Rafah in its fight against Hamas looks imminent, with more Israeli tanks deployed near the border. A plan to evacuate civilians is underway. Kim Bo-kyung gives the details.
Israel's military operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah seems to be imminent. There is growing evidence of an Israeli operation into this corner of the Strip, where more than half of the Palestinian territory's population of 2.3 million has sought shelter, with around 30 tanks and troops deployed to a nearby military base. This comes as the Israeli military has begun moving one of its main infantry brigades south. According to the Times of Israel, citing military sources, two reservist brigades, the 679th Armored Brigade and the 2nd Infantry Brigade, which have been operating on the northern border, will be moved to the central region of Gaza, freeing up the Nahal Brigade to join with the 162nd Division in preparing for future operations, including the planned offensive into Rafah. This comes in line with what Israel has kept on saying, that it will move into the city to launch a full-scale ground assault. Chief of the General Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, Herzi Halevi, informed Israel's wartime cabinet on Thursday that the army had completed preparations for a ground attack on Rafah and that they were ready to move in once the order was given. With the Israel Defense Forces operation in Rafah looming, Israel has begun preparations to evacuate civilians and is coordinating with neighboring Egypt. According to Axios, Israel's top intelligence and military officials met with Egyptian officials in Cairo on Wednesday, which is currently concerned that the Israeli operation would lead to tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians entering its territory. Egypt and the United Arab Emirates have already set up large tent shelters between Rafah and Khan Yunis, as well as in the coastal Wasi area northwest of Rafah. Meanwhile, a top UN aid official on Wednesday urged Israel to allow a sustained flow of assistance into the Gaza Strip, saying urgent and continuous humanitarian measures should be in place.
Whilst implementation of some measures is ongoing, further definitive and urgent steps are needed to set the course for a sustained flow of humanitarian and commercial goods into Gaza in terms of volume, need, and reach.
The UN's urging comes after Israel pledged nearly 3 weeks ago to improve aid access, after U.S. President Joe Biden demanded steps to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Thank you very much for your briefing.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to visit China next month for what would be his first foreign trip since he extended his presidential term for another 6 years. Meanwhile, NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg has warned China to stop aiding Russia's war against Ukraine if it seeks good relations with Western countries. Pei-Yun-ji explains.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced plans to visit China in May. He made the announcement at a meeting of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs in Moscow on Thursday local time, but did not give any other details, including when exactly the trip would take place. This would be his first overseas trip since the 71-year-old secured his 5th term in office through last month's election, but his second trip to China in 7 months, since October 2023. As Russia faces further isolation from the West after its invasion of Ukraine, Putin is also soon set to visit North Korea. Earlier this year, North Korea's state media reported that Putin thanked Kim Jong-un for his invitation to visit Pyongyang and pledged to go there at an early date. In the meantime, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, using unusually harsh words, warned China to stop supporting Russia's war against Ukraine if it wants to have good relations with the West. While visiting Berlin, he explained that Russia imported 90% of its microelectronics from China, which are used to manufacture missiles, tanks, and aircraft, and that Beijing is also working to provide Moscow with improved satellite capabilities and imaging.
China says it wants good relations with the West. At the same time, Beijing continues to fuel the largest armed conflict in Europe since World War II. They cannot have it both ways.
The NATO chief added that it's not too late for Ukraine to prevail as more support from the West is on the way, noting that the U.S. approved more than $60 billion in new military aid, and the U.K. promised support earlier this week. He also highlighted that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea must not believe that they can get their way by using force, saying they must understand that democracies are strong. Pei-Yun-ji, Arirang News.
Earlier in the U.S., delegates from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo held an inaugural meeting aimed at addressing the abuse of sensitive technologies through tighter export controls, as agreed during last year's Trilateral summit at Camp David. The U.S. is particularly concerned about China, Russia, and Iran. Lee Soo-jin has more.
High-level officials from South Korea, the United States, and Japan have agreed to strengthen cooperation in tightening export controls and blocking leaks of sensitive technology. The agreement was reached between the three countries during the Disruptive Technology Protection Network Summit held on Thursday local time in Washington, according to South Korea's Trade Ministry and Justice Ministry. The Justice Ministry and its counterparts in Tokyo and Washington will work together to enforce laws regarding technology leakages, while the Trade Ministry agreed to strengthen export controls. The governments of each country are planning to also more actively share information in areas of technology protection and export controls. The meeting comes after the leaders of the three nations met at Camp David last August, where they agreed to launch the Disruptive Technology Protection Network in order to work more closely to prevent innovative technologies from being used to endanger national security. And Thursday's meeting marked the first high-level trilateral summit of the Disruptive Technology Protection Network. While the Camp David summit did not mention who was abusing these innovative technologies, U.S. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco called out China, Russia, and Iran in her opening remarks during Thursday's meeting, where she said, "From China backing cyber hackers who target international businesses and political leaders, to Russia unleashing the most significant land invasion in Europe since the Second World War, to Iran plotting to assassinate dissidents around the world." She added that their actions are far-reaching as these threats are playing out on phones and online apps. Earlier this week, in a move to address what the U.S. government sees as a national security threat, President Biden signed a bipartisan legislation to ban Chinese-owned TikTok unless it is sold. The U.S. senior official also said that artificial intelligence is currently at the top of the U.S. government's enforcement priority list for disruptive technologies. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
On the cultural front, while all BTS members are completing their mandatory military service, they stay connected with fans through their music. Group leader RM has his second solo album scheduled for release next month. BTS agency Big Hit Music announced on Friday that RM's new album, Right Place, Wrong Person, will be released on May 24th at 1 p.m. The album consists of 11 tracks, all of which RM contributed to by writing the lyrics, and according to the agency, infused them with alternative music and rich sounds. The upcoming release comes almost 1.5 years after his first solo album, Indigo, was dropped in December 2022. Friday means it's time for our weekly arts and culture segment. We have our culture correspondent Song Yu-jin in the studio. Hey there, Yu-jin.
Happy Friday, Jungmin.
Happy Friday. What do you have for us today?
Well, Jungmin, this week I want to talk about classical music because spring is sort of like classical music season here in Korea. The second oldest out of Korea's three major classical music festivals, the Tongyeong International Music Festival, took place just last month. And this week is actually big because the oldest, the Symphony Festival with Hanwha, is running until this Sunday. And we also saw the youngest, the Seoul Spring Festival of Chamber Music, kicking off a few days ago. Now, SSF, as this festival is also known, may have the shortest history among the three, but it's driven by a significant purpose. So for this week, here's what you can expect at this year's edition. The youngest of Korea's big three classical music festivals is back. The Seoul Spring Festival of Chamber Music has returned for its 19th edition. The orchestrator is first-generation classical musician and violinist Kang Dong-seok. Back in 2006, Kang teamed up with the Seoul city government to turn his dream into reality.
That was one of my dreams, that to start something in Korea. And this kind of festival exists everywhere in the world, you know, and in any major cities they would have this kind of, you know, very specific festival, you know, devoted to chamber music. So.
But SSF isn't just about performances. It's about breaking down barriers, especially in chamber music, and making classical tunes accessible to everyone.
I think it's just they have some kind of cliche that chamber music is difficult and not accessible and all that, but I think that's completely wrong. So we have to try to prove that.
Joining Kang this year are 59 musicians in perfect harmony under the theme All in the Family. The lineup includes performances from families of musicians to ensembles who forged tight bonds through years of collaboration. Among the performers is Matthew Dufour, former principal flutist at the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra.
It's quite intense, but it's always such a great opportunity to see old colleagues, and to meet also new ones. And I have to say, in Korea, there are so many fantastic young musicians, and so that's why it's exciting. It's kind of
SSF's impact goes beyond the stage. Throughout the festival's nearly two-decade run, Korea has seen a rise in chamber music festivals across the country.
Festivals like SSF are really making classical music more accessible by offering the public a series of top-notch performances. Also, with more festivals popping up and increased funding from both the public and private sectors, they're able to attract better artists and put on more captivating shows in proper venues.
For those who wish to explore the world of classical music, the Seoul Spring Festival of Chamber Music runs until May 5th.
Eugene, for those who are interested, tell us a bit more about the programs that this year's SSF has to offer.
Absolutely. So we have 11 concerts remaining. Most of them will take place at the Seoul Arts Center. We actually have one coming up that starts in an hour. The concert is titled Family Tragedy, and all programs of SSF are worth watching, but a lot of people say its highlight is its iconic outdoor concert at late President Yoon Bo-seon's more than 150-year-old hanok, or the Korean traditional style house, in Seoul's Anguk-dong in Jongno-gu district. So Yoon served as Korea's second president from 1960 to 1962, and that concert starts tomorrow, Saturday at 5:30 p.m. And tickets for each concert of SSF can be bought online, and the 13-day festival will conclude with its final concert, finale Tragiko, next Sunday at the Seoul Arts Center.
A classical music concert at a hanok, what a combination. And Eugene, besides the Classical Music Festival, what are some other ways to promote Korean classical music to both domestic and global audiences?
So experts suggest that the key to making classical music more beloved is, of course, top-notch musicians and performances. And Korea is actually doing quite a good job at this front because, as you know, we've been continuously seeing Korean musicians winning titles at international competitions and also joining world-class orchestras. So what we could do as of now is more classical music concerts, shaking things up a bit from its traditional format with the musicians front and center and the audience in the background. So, for example, setting up professional management systems like they do in the K-pop industry, increase somewhat like a classical music ensemble group, or making more audition or entertainment programs involving these musicians could really help classical music and the musicians becoming more friendlier to the public.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eugene. My pleasure. As temperatures gradually rise, most parts of the country were above 25 degrees Celsius today. Tomorrow, temperatures will rise further, and on Sunday, there will be places where they will exceed 30 degrees. Seoul will also see midsummer-like weather with temperatures rising to 30 degrees. Meanwhile, some of the recent yellow dust affected the eastern parts of the country again today. The air will be dusty throughout the western regions tomorrow morning as the atmosphere is stagnant.
Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Gwangju will start off at 13 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 28 in Daejeon and Gwangju. Daegu and Gyeongju, 30 degrees. On Sunday, Jeju Island will receive about 5 to 20 millimeters of rain. The early heat will be dampened by rain across the country on Monday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
제주도에 처음에 놀러 갔을 때 새롭게 단장했다고 영상이 들어서 나와봤는데
할게요. 스트릿 사진 한 장이었는데 혼자서 좋은 건축을
한국인들만의 마음들. 같이 갈래요?
everyone. Welcome to Within the Frame. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Han Daeun. New jeans are once again in the global spotlight, but this time it's not for their music or fashion. It's about the power clash between the CEO of their agency ADOR and the leadership of its parent company HYBE, which exacerbated after Min Hee-jin's emotionally charged, unfiltered press conference. Meanwhile, K-cinema continues to captivate audiences worldwide, garnering recognition from prestigious film festivals like Cannes and the Beijing International Film Festival. On this episode of Within the Frame, we bring you a two-part special delving into the latest buzz in both the K-pop and K-cinema realms. First, we begin with the K-pop scene, and for that we have Bernie Cho, president of DFSB Collective, joining us via Zoom. Welcome to the program.
It's good to be back.
All right, first, give us a snapshot of the internal strife within HYBE. What is the primary source of conflict, and what are the respective positions being asserted by HYBE and its subsidiary ADOR?
This has to be arguably probably the wildest week in the K-pop industry. And again, to answer your question just right away, right off the top, the primary source of this conflict is complex, it's convoluted, and it's controversial. I think the best place to start is Monday, and it was by no means a happy Monday. Out of nowhere, suddenly, unexpectedly, HYBE announced that they were going to conduct an internal audit immediately on one of their most successful subsidiaries, ADOR. And soon after this audit was announced, surprisingly, and to the shock of the music industry, HYBE immediately demanded that the CEO, Min Hee-jin, resign. Soon afterwards, Min Hee-jin, who refused to resign, issued a statement basically accusing HYBE of basically being in collusion with another sublabel, the Lift Lab, who are the producers and the creators of a new girl band called Illit, and claiming that they were guilty of plagiarism. And then throughout the week, it was a he said, just sifting through what they said, who said. There are multiple versions of the so-called truth, and at the moment, none of them even come close to matching each other. What's very significant, worth highlighting, is the fact that this has inflicted massive damage on not just the HYBE brand, the HYBE reputation, but the HYBE stock. Since the scandal broke on Monday, and the stock dropped past 10% to the point where HYBE was temporarily suspended. And right now, the stock has dropped, as of today, another 5%. And so basically from Monday to today, as we speak, almost 1.2 trillion Korean won, or nearly $900 million of market cap, market valuation, company value has dropped as a result of this scandal. Now, from the HYBE side, they're claiming a dirty laundry list of allegations ranging from an attempted management coup, leaking of personal information, plotting to undermine HYBE, spreading of false rumors, toxic work environment, and then they even ripped a page out of the Park Geun-hye playbook of claiming that a shaman was somehow involved with the management or operations of ADOR. And when we look at ADOR, from the ADOR side, CEO Min Hee-jin, who has not yet resigned, she has stuck to her story, which is basically this all came about because she raised internally the issue and concern that another band in the HYBE portfolio was openly and shamelessly plagiarizing New Jeans. And when she pointed this out and tried to raise this issue, not with one, but with multiple executives, she felt that she was ghosted. And the moment she raised this, she felt that she was a victim of retribution, and that this is what prompted and triggered the audit. And so right now, almost in real time, we are getting sort of a back and forth, just sort of play-by-play, blow-by-blow from both sides. And frankly speaking, as a fan of both HYBE and of ADOR, it's just really sad to see what has happened and has transpired, and what it's just mudslinging at just an extremely low level. And ironically, the label name ADOR is supposed to represent and mean love, and right now there's absolutely no love lost between these two companies and these two titans in the K-pop industry.
Well, the clash has now escalated into a legal battle as HYBE reported ADOR CEO Min Hee-jin for breach of trust, asserting that it has gathered specific evidence that Min attempted to seize management of ADOR. So we'll be watching closely on how things pan out from here. And Min Hee-jin, the woman behind the mega success of New Jeans, gave an emotional press hearing yesterday, not hesitating to use profanity and make derogatory remarks at HYBE. And as you alluded to, she claims that HYBE labels new girl group Islet copied New Jeans in all areas. What's your take?
Well, again, Min Hee-jin is widely regarded and, more importantly, widely respected as not just being a creative, but a creative genius. And the thing is that when you are a creative, ideas and concepts are your capital. It's your currency. And when you feel your ideas and concepts are somehow being cribbed or worse, being copied, that feels like theft. So I empathize and sympathize with her issues and concerns specific to this. Unfortunately, from a business standpoint, and let alone maybe even from a legal standpoint, proving there was plagiarism or theft is much harder. It's very difficult to prove. For instance, if you're a chef, recipes can't be copyrighted and you can't sue somebody for copying your recipe. And if you're a fashion designer, a certain color or a type of fabric cutting style can't be copyrighted, and you can't sue somebody for copying the recipe. And in this case, obviously, Min Hee-jin, she is very much a creative chef when it comes to how she created the recipe of success for New Jeans. But unfortunately, just copying the recipe for success because the colors look too similar, the style feels a little too close to comfort, technically, it's not illegal. Ethically, though, definitely questionable. But I feel it's more of an ethical issue than a legal issue. And again, it's really sad to see how quickly this spiraled and just went off the rails.
Well, from artists' point of view, it may be a clear theft. But for some people who are not as interested and focused on K-pop idols, distinguishing between the multitude of girl groups can be a daunting task. To me, quite frankly, they all just seem lovely, bubbly, and very talented. So how the court will navigate through the blurry boundaries of copyright infringement will be another point to keep an eye on. And some point out that the rare conflict, the likes of which have almost been non-existent in the K-pop industry, may be due to the multi-label system pioneered by HYBE. HYBE owns Big Hit Entertainment behind BTS, B-Lift Lab for a boy band, N-Hyphen, Source Music for Le Seraphim, and a few others. What are the problems and challenges of the multi-label system?
Well, before I answer that question, I think we have to rephrase this idea of a multi-label system being pioneered by HYBE. I think it's safe to say and more accurate to say that the multi-label system was pioneered in Korea by HYBE. The multi-label system in and of itself is very common, and frankly, it's very standard in the West, particularly with the big three majors, Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music. And as far as I'm concerned, and in my opinion, I think the multi-label system is not only good, but great, but only if there is diversity and differentiation. When you look at the big three majors, Universal, Sony, and Warner, they have a lot of diversity in genres amongst their multi-labels. Now, based on the annual revenues of HYBE, technically HYBE is the fourth largest music entertainment company that's recording and producing music artists. As far as I'm concerned, and many industry people are concerned, HYBE has every right and reason to now be considered possibly maybe part of the big three. Now we should maybe look at them as the Fab Four globally. Now, I think, and again, I think HYBE has even alluded to and has mentioned that the multi-label system, as good as it may be, there's definitely room for improvement. And this particular incident, this particular scandal has really highlighted possibly maybe some cracks in the system. And again, you mentioned it just earlier, it seems like, as far as I'm concerned, it might be an issue of a lack of variety, a lack of diversity, because when you look at all the different sub-labels within HYBE, it almost kind of sort of feels like a little bit of same and more the same. Each and every one of the labels are either putting out a boy band or a girl band, putting out similar styles of music. And when you have internally and in-house so many similar bands and so many similar artists and so many similar labels all trying to strive for the same goal, which is to sell more, stream more, do more, it's inevitable that this in-house competition could potentially, and as we've seen, definitely create not only friction but factions and having this blow up into a fracturing of the system. And so it's something that a lot of analysts, and particularly those who have been following the HYBE stock, have pointed out and spotlighted. And I think it's a worthy discussion and perhaps even a debate.
Well, HYBE's innovative multi-label system, at least here in Korea, was a groundbreaking approach in the K-pop industry. But like all pioneering endeavors, it comes with both advantages and drawbacks. And the K-pop scene will be watching very closely on how HYBE tackles new challenges. We do have a few more grounds to cover, but due to time restraint, we're going to have to let you go now. Thank you so much, Bernie, for sharing your perspectives.
Thank you.
Now to the latest buzz surrounding K-cinema. Director Ryu Seung-hwan's action-packed sequel Veteran secured a coveted spot in the Cannes Festival's midnight screening category. Meanwhile, the gripping occult blockbuster Exuma maintains its hold on global audiences, getting an invitation from China's prominent film festival. Let's now delve into these stories and more with Jason Betervez, film critic and professor at Kyungdong University, who joins us in the studio. It's always great to have you with us.
It's always great to be here talking about something I love very much, Korean films and Korean content.
Let's start with the good news. The sequel to Veteran, titled I, the Executioner, has earned a ticket to the prestigious Cannes Film Festival. It was listed in the midnight screening category. Could you first tell us a bit about the category and the significance the invitation holds?
Yeah, sure. This is the category that tends to invite genre-driven films. And so since 2016, that was the year Train to Busan was premiered at the Cannes Film Festival to much acclaim. And there was this huge buzz surrounding the movie. And it went on to do extremely well, both here in Korea and overseas. And since then, there's been a Korean film in the category every single year. Sometimes, actually, there have been two films. There's one film one year, I think, this following year, where they had The Merciless and The Villainous screening in that particular section. And since then we've had a movie screening or premiering at the Cannes Film Festival in the midnight section every year. And I think that just goes to show that the programmers have a big appetite for Korean genre cinema. When it comes to genre films, you know, Korea really does punch above its weight. So it's no surprise. In fact, it's got to the point now where I just expect a Korean film in the midnight section, and this year, and I'm very delighted to hear that it was Ryu Seung-hwan's Veteran sequel. And he's a director who's actually continued to make films during the pandemic. We had Milsu, and we also had the his other film, Escape from Mogadishu, and so he released those films despite the risks involved. And so I'm really happy for him to get back into the Cannes Film Festival. One of his films, Crime Fist, screened there all those years ago. And so, yeah, it is significant, but sadly we only have one Korean film at the Cannes Film Festival this year, or feature. So I guess that's, I mean, it's on the one hand, yes, it's great to have a Korean film in midnight, but on the other hand, it's like, well, we only have one movie this year, and each year we tend to have 4 or 5 films. So bit of a mixed picture there.
Which leads us to our next question. Like you said, no Korean movies were selected for the in competition at the Cannes Film Festival, and this for 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
What are the implications for the Korean movie industry?
Okay, so the Cannes, the main competition in Cannes is basically a competition for auteurs. So these are established filmmakers with distinctive styles, you know, famous movie makers or filmmakers essentially. And so each year you'd have these, you know, some of the world's top filmmakers screening in or having their films premiering in competition. So it's extremely difficult to kind of penetrate that kind of field of filmmakers.
Right.
So, you know, over the years, we've had filmmakers such as Ken Loach and various other. In Korea, of course, we've got Bong Joon-ho, Park Chang-wook, Lee Chang-dong, Hong Sang-soo, and Im Sang-soo. And in fact, you know, there aren't many Korean filmmakers that actually made it into competition. Bong Joon-ho only made it in competition with Okja in 2017. That his films, the Host, premiered in the Director's Fortnight, which is a sidebar. Not competition, obviously, it's not even part of the main selection. And then his film Mother screened in Uncertain Regard. So again, not competition, it was Okja. And so it's just, yeah, you have to be very fortunate. And Nahal as well. I mean, the Wailing screened in Cannes, but it didn't screen in competition. So I don't think it necessarily means anything bad for the Korean film industry. That being said, though, I think there's a lot of talk about, you know, the next generation of filmmakers. So you have the 386 generation, those filmmakers born in the 60s, went to university in the 80s, and were 30, were in their 30s when they entered the film industry in the 90s, when this term was called, this term was coined, the 386 generation. And so, yeah, the next generation, you know, those filmmakers that were born in the 80s and 90s, you know, a healthy industry needs to have younger filmmakers and getting those opportunities in Cannes. And yeah, definitely the Cannes Film Festival. I think that will happen, but sure, it's disappointing not to have a Korean film in competition. It's also worth mentioning that, you know, no director had films ready. So Bong Joon-ho's got a film ready, but it's being released in January. So some were expecting to get that to get into Cannes, but it's not a Korean film. But you know, the other directors, Park Chan-wook, he's got his latest HBO series that's screening in the US and also around the world, The Sympathizer. And so, yeah, I think the only exception perhaps is Nahal Jin, his film Hope, which wrapped up last summer. So that could have been a contender, but he tends to take a long time in post-production in his films. So it's probably not ready yet. So I think we'll see maybe a film potentially by Park Chan-wook or one of the other auteurs in competition next year.
You know, following the huge global success of many Korean movies, we often tend to forget how daunting, how challenging it is to make it to the main competition.
It's really hard. It's you know, the Cannes competition, it's the most prestigious film festival competition in the whole world. And you don't just get in there. They are very picky. And there are only a handful of Korean directors who have achieved it. And if they've not got films ready, you know, and for Korea, I think, you know, I mean, Park Chan-wook's Old Boy was the first film of his screening competition. It wasn't his first film, so to have a feature debut in competition by a Korean filmmaker, very, very difficult. So most likely it'll be a Korean filmmaker who's probably had a film premiere or screened elsewhere in the festival, and then eventually, hopefully, get into the main competition.
Meanwhile, the mega hit occult thriller Exuma, after hitting the 10 million audience milestone, has been invited to the Beijing International Film Festival, which is quite rare due to China's culture ban that's still rampant across various realms. How do you see this?
Yeah, no, this is potentially very interesting because, yeah, since the THAAD deployment, in 2016, I think it was, there was essentially a ban on Korean content in China. But there's still a lot of appetite in China for Korean content. I see that in my classes. You know, I've got students from China who are very eager to learn about Korean content and Korean films. But yeah, more recently, I think in 2022, they lifted the ban on streaming services or streaming sites, so they could have Korean films screen on those sites in China. And slowly but surely, we're seeing more Korean films get released in China and also screen at festivals. So it's great to see Exuma screen there. I mean, obviously China and Korea are quite different, but they also, you know, they're quite close to each other and share somewhat similar cultures in some respects. So I think, you know, certainly I see that in my classroom, you know, Chinese students really connecting with Korean films, perhaps in a different way compared to, you know, students from, you know, Europe and North America. So it's not surprising to see the interest in Korean content in China, but yeah, it's been unfortunate for the industry that it's taken quite a while since 2016 for Korean content to get back into the festivals, back into theatres and back onto streaming services.
And many here in Korea are cautiously optimistic that the unwavering popularity of K-contents, as exemplified by Exuma, could lead to China's easing of culture ban a little. Now, the roundup punishment set a Korean box office record for opening day sales, and it also surpassed 1.3 million spectators in just 2 days. Now, the third installment was largely considered a bit iffy. What are your prospects for the latest one?
I actually just saw it. I really enjoyed it. This is a film that screened at the Berlin Film Festival in February, and it opened to, what, 820,000 admissions, which makes it the fourth biggest opening of all time in Korea. You know, I mean, along with the Guards, Baoship Island, Train to Busan, they had bigger openings. But yeah, number 4, you know, in terms of, you know, its box office tally on its opening day is rather extraordinary. And it's not something I was expecting. And actually, just checking on my phone before coming on here, it's 847,000 tickets have been pre-sold ahead of the weekend. So it's going to do very well over the coming days. The reaction's been a little bit mixed. I think partly because it is quite dark, actually, compared to the third and the second instalment. It's quite violent. The jokes do come. They come a bit later, though. And there are actually some clapping in the screen, which is unusual, you know, at the end of the film. Like, people seem to enjoy it. So I think the reaction is somewhat mixed, perhaps not. They were surprised. I mean, I wasn't keen on the third one, partly because I think Ma Dong-seok, as much as I, or Yoon-Lee, as much as I love him, I think he kind of overkilled it with the punch, you know, in the third film, where he's just constantly just punching people, and it's just it becomes a little bit repetitive, and you know, as you're watching it. So, but with this film, he's definitely more restrained, I think, and that's something that I enjoyed, and yeah, there's lots of elements, and it's very well choreographed. The cinematography, you know, and as well is very good, and so the villain Kim Il is also quite convincing. I think the villains in the third film were not particularly very strong. So yeah, I had a great time, I had a blast, and I hope audiences do too this weekend. But it's very encouraging for the industry. I think it's beginning to turn a corner, following from the success of Exuma and also 12/12 The Day, or Soleilbom.
Well, I hear that Yoon-Lee, he takes credits as planner, producer, as well as co-screenwriter.
Yeah, he's a jack of all trades.
And he plans to extend the installment to the 8th installment. So that's definitely something.
Well, clearly the opening tally here suggests that there's still some way to go for him for the series to run out of steam. And yeah, I think we'll see at least another couple of installments.
Definitely something.
But yeah, I'm encouraged to see the film open so well. The question is how far it goes. Can it maintain momentum over the coming weeks ahead?
Definitely something to look forward to for all the Yoon-Lee fans out there. Thank you so much, Jason, for sharing your insights today.
Thank you for having me. Absolute pleasure to be here, as always.
And that does it for today's Within the Frame. Thank you for watching, and have a great weekend.
Korea. Some people call it the country of Taekwondo.
People are more interested in Korean culture and other aspects of it, and one of those things is Taekwondo.
Surtout, ne commencez jamais le taekwondo, parce que si jamais un jour vous commencez, vous ne pourrez jamais vous arrêter d'en faire.
아, 정말 이렇게 제 인생을 좌우할지는 정말 몰랐어요. 왜냐하면 태권도의 나라, 한국에서 태권도를 하고 싶어서 한국에 처음 왔는데 지금은 13년째 살고 있습니다. 태권도 이런 무술입니다.
저는 사실 한 달만 하고 포기할 줄 알았어요. 근데 너무 재밌어요. What I really like about Taekwondo is that it doesn't only give you the physical abilities, such as like flexibility or strength, it also gives you the mental abilities.
I love the spirit of Taekwondo. It's a great martial arts with a lot of respect, a lot of values. Also with the Pumse, very beautiful techniques. It's a sport that you can, it's a martial art that you can practice from 7 to your old age.
I've never seen them be so committed to anything if they've played other sports, but nothing like this before.
Especially when like two very little kids are fighting, because it's really fun to watch.
So it's a great way for all of us to do this together.
I'm going to keep doing Taekwondo until this becomes a black belt.